Hi folks, Florida Man here, and what you're listening to now is another part of Talleyrand. What follows is Talleyrand, 1909 through 1911. The French perspective. In fall, I see you, well, there's a whole bunch of red, but you successfully destroy the Italian unit in Silesia and advance into that position so that you are now dangerously close to being able to take Warsaw, and you're also still, keeping Munich despite Italy's unsupported move into it. You and Italy still sort of moving stuff in the Mediterranean, but nothing really changes there. Russia moves Baltic Sea back up to Sweden. Was that expected?
It wasn't expected. We hadn't discussed it, but I don't mind. I'm basically ignoring the Scandinavian centers, and that I kind of just count them as mine at this point. That I can grab them whenever I want to. I'm at 17 centers, even if it doesn't say it, right? And I can. He has one fleet up there. That one fleet alone is not enough to defend those centers.
You're right. He can't defend those centers against you, even assuming he wants to. If he wants to, of course, that's kind of a problem in itself, because it means he might be more likely to try and use the southern support to hold out in Warsaw and Moscow.
Yeah, and I think he's not giving up on the game. So I think he is still trying to defend. And I'm actually happy to see him out of Baltic. I think it's go hang out up there if you want to. It's be away from the front lines. One less unit that have to worry about what it's doing in the only area of the conflict that I actually am worried about.
Yeah, I think. At this moment, when you have him in Baltic, really, it's just kind of a threat that maybe one season he'll randomly decide to sneak into Kiel or Berlin or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Winter 1908, I see you build another army, as you've been doing, and Russia builds an army. So the armies are strong with you guys. Spring 1908, we see that there's no progress happening anywhere.
Yeah,
just red dots or rather red arrows and things that are holding and supporting each other to hold successfully. Russia is in a very defensive posture, as is kind of unsurprising, really. Almost seems like he's on board with Italy and Turkey in defending against you now, because Turkey's also supporting Warsaw to hold.
Yeah, I mean, Turkey is certainly on board with defending and pushing the draw here, right?
That makes sense. He knows he can't do any better than being in a draw.
Yeah, I think there's this really where scoring comes in. I don't think we actually agreed upon a scoring system for this game.
We didn't.
But traditionally, this is where people would be starting to think of, is there any way I can move my score around a little bit, right? Can I push somebody out of the draw and increase my score there? Can I steal a dot here or there to increase my score? That sort of thing.
Yeah, that is the way it tends to go in tournament play. I'm more used to the play diplomacy scoring system where it's just the size of the draw that matters. So Russia's share of the draw would be equal to France's share of the draw, which would be equal to Italy's and equal to Turkey's, which is arguably not as good of a system. But it's not a tournament, and we didn't agree on tournament scoring. We didn't agree, as you pointed out, on any kind of scoring. It's still low, or it's just a draw.
Yeah, and I think if you are thinking in terms of draw size, I think there's probably Russia and Italy are really the odd players out, right? Turkey essentially can't be eliminated in this game, and obviously I can't either. Even if all three of them try to gang up, and apparently Turkey behind the scenes is trying to convince Russia to join in on an attack against me around this time. But that's folly, right? That's not going to happen with this current positioning. Whereas I think there is a path where, even from this current position, there certainly is a path with Italy to eliminating Russia, right? There's unquestionably a path there, right? And there's also a path to eliminating Italy, right? And the real question is, can they do that safely enough without me soloing, right? And I think probably tough to eliminate Italy without me soloing, in that he can just say, if you pull back, Turkey, if you touch any of my centers, I'm just going to let France walk right into Tunis, right? Whereas Turkey probably could take Warsaw, assuming I go along with it, and guarantee that he keeps it, right? And I think that that's what my main play here is. Really, is trying to keep the Russian a little bit agitated, and make as much as possible, make him think that I am his friend for life, right? Just to the point that if it gets down to an emotional situation, he'll just throw it at me, right? And then trying to keep Turkey a little frustrated. I think I kind of want everyone to be a little frustrated at this point. They would all probably just like to end the game at this point, but keep them into thinking about all right, what do I need to do to get this game to end? And say, trying to basically get him on board and that he didn't kill Russia to end this game. But doing so in a way where Russia ends up pissed enough at them to throw the game to me.
What are you foreseeing for the fall here?
For the fall, we really didn't discuss too much, so it's really I'm expecting just a bunch more holds, right? I think that's what one would probably anticipate here.
The Turkish perspective.
France did not build a fleet in Brest in winter of 1908, which indicated their continued indecisiveness around the elimination of Russia, which at this point means that I don't believe Russia can be eliminated without giving France relatively good solo opportunities, because they could support themselves into Livonia this turn or in the future, and then they'd have 3 armies on Warsaw, whereas I only have 2, so even if I tried to support myself in, France could theoretically capture Warsaw with 2 supports rather than my 1, and that could potentially give France a solo, which means that I have initiated talks to create a 4-way draw this game instead of a 3-way draw. It is a bit disappointing that France couldn't have realized a lot sooner that they weren't going to solo and stopped with their relatively pointless moves and just either agreed to back off from the stalemate line such that we could all work together, Italy, France, and I, to eliminate Russia and get a 3-way draw. And so since they're not interested in that, at this point I am supporting Warsaw and Moscow with my units and waiting until France decides that, yes, we have indeed stalemated the board, which is the logical conclusion looking at the map, but France somehow does not seem to have realized that yet. They sent some messages to Russia and I trying to get us to turn on Italy in order to get a 3-way draw that way, but both Russia and I realize that that will not lead to a 3-way draw, that will lead to a French solo, as is obvious because Italy can and has threatened to throw a solo to France if I backstabbed them, which is the totally logical thing to do, and they wouldn't even have needed to threaten that. It's the obvious strategic implication. So it is becoming more and more frustrating to work with France, as the game should have by all means ended by now, and has not, because France somehow thinks that the game is not stalemated. Yes, France can theoretically capture Norway, Sweden, and St. Petersburg, but again, with my supports, they're not going to be able to take Warsaw or Moscow, or make any progress along the stalemate line, which Italy and I have set up. So France can get to 17 centers if they want to, but it is inconsequential. The number of people drawing is the same, so all they're doing is just wasting everyone's time. It is not particularly surprising at this point that this is what the French player is like, given that apparently they thought they were in some sort of 2-way draw deal with Italy all along, and that's why neither of them attacked, which really all that means is that Italy did a great job convincing France to never attack them so that Italy could have space to grow in the east. So good job Italy there, but wow, that's some serious problems with the negotiation from France to think that the obligations from a 2-way draw alliance mean that Italy shouldn't have moved to the stalemate line to prevent France from taking Tunis. It's bizarre that France thinks that Italy would have just handed France a solo. So yeah, the French player is being a bit bratty, in my opinion, at not just being willing to draw at this point, given the strategic implications of the board. The one thing I kind of decided, or I had planned in fall to capture Greece with my fleet in the spring. I had planned to move to Greece to take it from Italy, just, as a petty sort of thing, because I'd told Italy previously when I'd supported them in that I wanted it at some point in the game, which is stupid, but it was just kind of a haha, look at me, I'm alive. And Italy didn't need the extra unit anyways, so it would have been fine, but given that France really wanted me to stab Italy, and I don't really want France to continue keeping the game going for longer than it needs to, because we have reached a four-way draw and there's nothing changing that. I decided not to make that move because I don't want to provide France any encouragement that I might potentially stab Italy. So I decided not to do that. So I'm going to remain on 6 centers for the rest of this game, and Italy is going to remain on 9 centers. Russia may go down to 2 to bring France up to 17, but it doesn't matter. Given the events that have happened, I think Russia made a good choice by actually disbanding their northern units and working with France, because I think what must have been the case is they realized that France was this type of player that just looks for alliances and sticks to those, and so realized that if they could get an alliance with France, France would be very reluctant to attack them, which has allowed Russia to stay in the draw. So even as critical as I am of some of Russia's moves, I think they have overall played this game quite decently. Can't really say the same thing of France, but I've said this before, but the fact that France is getting a draw rather than a solo out of this game is a testament to France needing to learn more about how to play, because diplomacy is a difficult game and it's really hard to play it well, and I don't claim to be the expert, and I don't know if I could have soloed from the French position either, but I certainly think I would have tried harder than France did. And I just kind of had maybe a little bit higher expectations from the players on this board. Not that the game hasn't been well played overall, but I would have hoped for slightly more interest in trying to push for the solo at a time when it makes sense, rather than just making petty requests now when all three of Italy, Russia, and I understand that France is going to make a solo, and the only way to stop that is by all working together. Sadly, the game didn't draw, but hopefully we can force France to draw soon. I mean, we've basically reached the conclusion of this game. I look forward to, once it finishes, actually doing a retrospective on both my moves, my mistakes and successes, and also discussing some of the mistakes and successes that I saw from the players around me. An interesting game overall, but I guess it's ending in a four-way draw fairly soon.
The French perspective. A whole bunch of nothing happened.
Yeah.
So I think it's... Oh, wait. Something did happen. It would appear that a Norwegian fleet has gotten lost and strayed into the North Sea.
Yes, yeah, Russia has decided that he wants to just, come grab some centers of mine. And I kind of am treating this as like, okay, I have more centers than I need. So you want to go hang out in Edinburgh, you want to go hang out anywhere, whatever. Obviously, and I'm going to compensate myself by taking your Scandinavian centers as you do so, but it's far from a devastating move on his part. Right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is I find this pretty humorous. I think makes a lot of sense for you to have this attitude. It also makes sense, I think, sort of for Russia to try this, just because there's literally nothing for him to lose, except for maybe he ticks you off, but you're not ticked off. And even if he does tick you off, if Turkey and Italy know what's good for them, they know that it's probably best to keep Russia, on side and alive, because if Russia dies, there's a decent chance you're the one who ends up holding at least one of those crucial centers.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are you foreseeing for the coming year from this position?
Unfortunately, probably nothing too interesting. I'll probably try to negotiate to get the Turkish player to get Turkey and Italy to agree to attack Warsaw, and I'll say I'll support you into Warsaw. You can grab it, and maybe they'll go for it, right? You can, and they're just saying let's end this now. We are kind of at the stalemate lines, but I don't really see a reason that I should be forced to end at this point, because the truth is they have a 3-player stalemate line, and that is a unstable stalemate line because it depends upon all 3 of them continuing to coordinate, continuing to like each other, continuing to have the patience to continue defending the stalemate line, versus me as one player. I don't have to coordinate with anyone, and I just have to put my units in, and I could do no contact, no talking, right? If I needed to, right? That I think they're trying to force me to draw here, and I don't think I should draw prematurely, right? Until I've seen that they truly all love each other and truly can be convinced to turn on each other in some way.
Yeah, I think that there's still at least some play left in this game. The fact that Russia is still trying to take centers from you is something. Even if it might be considered trivial, if you didn't do much to respond to it, and Russia got like all of England, that could make a difference. Your defense break. Italy might end up soloing. Things can happen. Things can go differently. And mostly, I think it'll be interesting to see if you manage to do anything to break into Russia, because I do think there are means by which it might be possible. Depends on how clever you are. Depends on what kind of tricks you play. And Russia's defense is not perfect. Turkey's defense of Russia is strong, but maybe it can be co-opted. Maybe you can get Turkey to be an attacker instead. Or if you can't shift the position at all in the next year or two, then we'll make it a draw.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to do, is just see if there's a way to get them to attack, right? And at least, and even if I somehow don't find a way to solo out of that, we could at least lower the draw size, right? Get Russia out of this. Generally, people like a lower draw size, so I think that's a reasonable outcome.
Having a smaller draw size does mean something to. I think no matter what scoring system you use, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much every system values that. And then the other thing is, I think as the player topping the board but not yet soloing, I don't feel any strong pressure to draw it. And they'll say that they're at the stalemate line. They very clearly, they're at the central stalemate line. Like, nothing's going to change in Warsaw and along the armies there without a change in positions by somebody. But they certainly haven't stalemated me in the north, right? I could take additional centers there. They haven't stalemated me. Would things look different if I'm like in St. Petersburg here, right? Would things, maybe they do. Maybe if I have like 3 units around St. Petersburg and Livonia, and they're they're feeling defeated or something, they decide to just go in or something.
Yeah, I do think that there's ways things could look different. I don't think that I don't think there's anything inevitable about this. I mean, it's not a great situation for your solo effort right now, but I do think it's possible. Yeah,
and it's really will come down to a diplomatic solo rather than there's no tactical breakthrough I can make here, right? Also, the North Fleet here, I'm just gonna dispatch the fleet from Denmark just to follow it around. So he can get one center at a time, but that's all he can take, right? Because as soon as he moves out of any of these centers, I'll just move right back in with Denmark, right? So he's not benefiting from it at all.
Well, I like that Russia has kept the game interesting, and you guys have also kept the game interesting, but I like that's a thing that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes things a little bit more fun. If I would say also, if the southern stalemate line looked a little bit different, if it was, if Italy had advanced a little bit further, I would also be more concerned. But the truth is, actually, in the current position, I have 4 fleets, and I actually only need 3 fleets to hold the line there. So that also makes me less concerned, in that I can actually spare a fleet from the southern stalemate to go deal with Russia if I need to. Hopefully the board looks a little bit different in a year or two. If it's just the same drawing lines, I'm probably just going to draw at some point too.
I support that. Now we get to spring 1910, and we see you do, as you had suggested before, you do take Sweden now that Russia has basically abandoned defending Scandinavia in favor of moving to the North Sea. You don't make any progress elsewhere, though.
No, and I don't really expect to make any progress elsewhere, to be honest, at this point. It's pretty clear stalemate lines sit up everywhere else. The only place that's really in play is in Scandinavia, assuming no strategic shifts in alliance structure.
Were you assuming a strategic shift in alliance structure would take place?
Certainly not on this move. You can see my moves don't assume any strategic structure and just purely defense everywhere else. So that's pretty much. I am pulling things north a little bit to, put Russia more on the defensive and make him feel, frankly, a little bit like he's going to get pushed out of this game. That is the goal of some of these moves, and also just to make sure, he can take one center at a time, but that's it. I told him at this point, go ahead and take Edinburgh if you want. That's fine. I'll take Sweden. We can just do a swap. He chose to hold, and I think his plan was to take it in the fall.
Is Russia expecting you to take both Sweden and Norway?
I don't think he was really expecting that. I think he thought I was just going to take Sweden. Honestly, it seemed a little bit obvious that I would take both, but he didn't. He thought I was going to be like totally friends with him. But yeah, he was a little bit upset about that.
Yeah, it seemed like kind of obvious many years ago, I think, that you were probably going to take all of Scandinavia. I am a little surprised that he's surprised, but people have different amounts of experience and come at the game from different reference points.
Yeah.
Elsewhere, I see things were pretty much static. So, were you getting to a place in fall of 1910 where you were starting to think, maybe I better just settle for the draw?
Kind of, not fully though. I mean, I was actually still talking to like Italy and Turkey and saying like, if you're not going to let me solo, at least we're going to like push Russia out of this game. There's no reason he should be in the final three. I think around this time, apparently Turkey had also reached out to Russia with some bizarro plan to somehow eliminate me from the game, which is frankly ludicrous. But
it sounds like maybe Turkey was trying to get Russia to abandon his defenses so Turkey could get Moscow or something. That's what that sounds like to me.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like for sure. But yeah, I think that this is, and my goal here is actually really just to not necessarily to fully go into like the stalemate, which I think is probably the way things are trending, but to make things feel a little bit hopeless for Russia, right? That he's going to get pushed out of this game. And if he's going to get pushed out of this game, like, why not throw it at me, right? Like I've been honest to you, I've been nice to you pretty much the whole game. Screw Italy, right? You're not going to win. But why not make Italy lose, right? It's basically the pitch that I'm giving him at this point.
Do you get the sense that Italy and Turkey are trying to extend to him some kind of a rope, some sense of hope, anything like that at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're probably like the Turkish idea of like somehow like pushing me out is some part of that. They're defending him. Seems like that's the way things are trending. That they're trying to just get it. They're both kind of just messaging me saying, let's stop dragging this out. Just agree to the draw.
Spring 1911. So this is an especially interesting season, I think, compared to virtually all of the others, because as you may have noticed, you got into Warsaw.
Yeah, it's a pretty dramatic shift. I'm across the stalemate line, and that's pretty much the 18th center I need if I'm going to solo, assuming I can hold on to it.
I think that is the most dramatic of shifts, yes.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's probably, unless something really suddenly changes, I think this could be the final turning point of the game. And I'm sure you probably agree. It's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, and I think that, this was Russia just, I think, following through that I convinced him that he was not going to make it to the winner's circle, and he might as well see me solo rather than get pushed out. And I might offer him, I kind of discussed plans with him. I was like, you know what, just go to Ukraine. I'm going to walk in behind you in Warsaw. You can hang out in Moscow, and you can protect Moscow, and that makes, at least you survived the end of the game, right? I think there's some pitch in that, right? That he at least gets to be at the survivor's table, if not the winner's table.
Yeah, I think you're fortunate to some degree that Italy and Turkey have really done very little to really mend the emotional broken fences with Russia, because I think this decision is I think Russia could very easily avoid being pushed out of the game just by supporting himself to hold in Warsaw and Moscow.
He certainly couldn't pretend. If all three of us, truly like ganged up on him, we could eliminate him for sure.
Well, ganged up on him how? Because you could certainly support Turkey into Warsaw if you had wanted to, and then maybe Turkey gets into Moscow as well. But if you're the one who supported Turkey into Warsaw, I think there'd be a little bit of vulnerability there. Maybe like Turkey could potentially lose Warsaw to you. I think there's some risk. There's certainly an element of potential difficulty there, and that they could accidentally toss you the solo.
Yeah, and that's why they were kind of taking the defensive moves here. I do think it's interesting that they switched for this turn. Bohemia, they weren't just doing defense here, right? They're actually trying to get Bohemia up into Silesia, right? and potentially surround Warsaw then, right, and have the potential to take it for themselves if they wanted to.
Yeah, I think that might have been their goal.
Yeah,
I think they were still not seeing that just protecting Russia in Warsaw and Moscow was their path.
Yeah, I mean, I made it clear I was not going to go for I didn't want to do the four-way draw, so I think they were trying to see, okay, maybe we can, if we kill Russia, will France agree to draw with us, right? And I think, the game's not over yet, right? Maybe this has all been a very elaborate ploy between the three of them to trick me into Warsaw and, force to disband that unit, which kudos to them if they have figured that out. I'm skeptical, but kudos to them if they have.
I think that would be a pretty bad ploy.
It's very risky and relatively low reward.
Exactly.
So if they somehow get it together, they manage that, and the fall somehow I'm out of Warsaw, and they've forced my unit to disband, then I'll probably just agree to the draw because that means they're coordinating very effectively.
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing.
I'm skeptical though. I'll say that.
So we've gone now from 1910, where it looked like, I guess this will inevitably be a draw, to, I guess this is a French solo.
Yeah, it looks like that, at least looking at these moves. That's why I didn't agree to the draw. I think 1908 or something, Italy and Turkey are both saying, let's just draw now. What are you dragging things on for? We just want to be done with this game. As the clear leader on the board, I don't think it's worth agreeing to a draw ever until things are really, really fixed in their stalemate lines. And there's no diplomatic play left. And I think the last few moves have certainly shown there still is diplomatic play left.
Yeah, I mean, this certainly isn't like a tournament game where you're playing all of the turns at once, and after this is over, you finally get to go to bed.
Yeah, right. It's we do have the luxury of time here.
Yeah, there's no time pressure on you to agree to a draw. So, I think this is probably what I would be trying to do in the same situation, because I would really hate to agree to a 4-hour draw.
Yeah, I think it would be a little bit silly, to be honest, at this point, especially when at least one of those powers could certainly be eliminated from the draw.
Well, I think the only way that they had of eliminating Russia was to risk you soloing, probably. Because anytime they start to try and eliminate Russia, and Russia gets mad about that, Russia can definitely help you. And we're seeing that, I think. Russia has this sense that he's about to be chiseled out, and he says, you know what? Italy and Turkey, you're out too.
Yeah. And certainly the move from Bohemia to Silesia, I would say, I didn't know that was coming, but it seems to fit nicely into the narrative that I'm telling to Russia, right? That looks like a move that's going to try to push to take Warsaw for themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they did themselves any favor with that move.
Ultimately, I think you're right. It must have seemed strategic and clever at the time. It was ultimately a tactical move and not something that would help them win the important war of hearts and minds in Russia.
Yeah, and I think you see also, Turkey is forced to disband Ukraine. Like, it's not super important, right? Given the diplomatic situation, but just in terms of pure tactical play, that is painful in that they have less ability to control what happens, that they've basically given up their control over the region.
Yeah, they have a lot less ability to control what happens. Honestly, at this point, they have so little control, it would almost be possible for you to start pushing south a little bit. Almost.
Yeah,
not quite, but almost. If you could get back Silesia and keep Ukraine, then you could get into Galicia. Really.
Yeah. Yeah, if somehow we got to that point, though.
Yeah.
I think the game is probably ending before then. Right.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, like, when you get into a situation where, in my mind, where one player, who's going to be the winner, probably, where one player, if the game continued, would conquer all of Europe, you know that something has broken down somewhere.
Yeah.
The Turkish perspective.
This is a recording for Turkey Fall 1911. So the interesting thing about this year is that France continued to refuse to draw and decided finally that they wanted to eliminate Russia. I guess they kind of decided that starting last year, but either way. So since France started attacking Russia, Italy and I figured that we would support Bohemia into Silesia, where we hadn't done so before. We figured it would have the best chance to work, and if not, France was probably holding, so nothing would happen in that case. And it turns out that was actually very critical. We were able to get Italy into Silesia because France supported themselves into Warsaw, and Russia decided to move out of Warsaw, disbanding my unit in Ukraine. I believe that Russia's intent was to give France the solo, and so it has been Italy and I's job this turn to convince them that they don't want to do that and to accept support back into Warsaw, which is a guaranteed move if Russia accepts it from Ukraine to Warsaw, but obviously that requires Russia to actually input those orders. If Russia does so, then we will have maintained the stalemate, and France will maximum be able to capture St. Petersburg and get to 17, whereas if they got Warsaw, they would get to 18. So we need Russian cooperation. This has kind of been the case all along, and it's been a bit of a delicate balance because Russia seems to be an emotionally unstable player, perhaps, who seemed to have definitely held a grudge against Italy for stabbing them a number of times. I think it made sense for Italy to stab in all of those cases, and it's more Russia's fault that they didn't make the orders to prevent it, but nevertheless, they, I think, have a strong grudge against Italy. So it's a bit tricky trying to convince them to not just throw the solo to France. So we have a group chat between Italy, Russia, and I, and what happened at the very soon after the spring moves adjudicated and it appeared that Russia is handing the solo to France, I think it's appropriate to read some of the messages here because I think this is one of those cases where the actual text of the messages matters a lot. So Italy asks in this chat, "Oh, you are purposely handing the solo to France out of sheer spite," and Russia answers correct. So Italy responds, "Essentially such a sore loser, you know this game is about manipulation, negotiation, lying as much as it's about tactics. Maybe if you're going to take everything so personally, you shouldn't play this game. You're just to accept that the times you tried to stab me, I preempted and countered them both. I'm not sorry I saw through your unwillingness to cooperate. Had you simply built a fleet when your allies had asked, this whole game would have been different." And Russia responds, "Let's agree to disagree." And Italy continues to dig in the knife, saying, "No, you are selfish, irrational, and short-sighted, and you've cost us all the game." This was all before I had a chance to respond. I told Italy after they said all of this that this was really, I think, fairly disastrous for us, because it seemed Italy had the belief that if Russia was beyond being able to be convinced with logic, then therefore the only emotion that could maybe be used to convince them to move Ukraine back to Warsaw was shame. So they tried to send these very, very harsh messages in this group chat to Russia in order to, I believe, shame Russia into moving Ukraine to Warsaw. And I think this is a real big mistake, because most people don't respond well to shame. I think this is just a psychology thing in general. When people are critical of others, usually the other people respond with defensiveness and are much less willing to listen to your side of a case than if you approach the negotiation from a point of emotional understanding and compassion. Even if you actually don't really care about their emotions, if you act like you understand what they're going through and sympathize with their feelings, they're much more likely to listen to you. And so I think Italy's very, very harsh messages here, just condemning Russia for a lot of mistakes that they definitely made, and I completely agree with Italy on all of these things, by stating them directly to Russia like this, it makes it way, way less likely that we can convince Russia to stop throwing the solo and instead accept our support back into Warsaw and just get a four-way draw. So at this point, I'm kind of in damage control, trying my best to convince Russia that they shouldn't do this. And I think what really benefits me here is that, unlike Italy, I never stabbed Russia. I essentially was always truthful to them, except when they allowed me to move into Sevastopol, I told them I'd build 2 fleets in Constantinople and Smyrna. Instead, I built 2 fleets in Constantinople and Ankara, which could be construed as a stab because they gave me a dot and I didn't do what I promised to do. But in general, I think that I've been a much more upfront player towards Russia than Italy has, and so there's a lot less hard feelings there. And I think this is really important for what I say to them to have a degree of resonance and maybe some sort of convincing value. It's still a long shot, but hey, if it's between getting a draw and losing to a solo, I'm going to take the long shot. So I send a long message in the same chat, and I tell Italy to basically stop saying what they're saying, that it's counterproductive in the private chat that I have with Italy. So what I say to Russia is, Russia, I believe that my ally Italy is making statements out of frustration that are actually counterproductive to our cause. I totally understand your desire to throw the game to France because of your feelings about Italy. It's natural to be frustrated about multiple stabs, and it's natural to just want to end the game that's dragged on for so long. Now, I'm saying this to Russia. I don't actually believe these things. I think it's silly to get emotional about this game in that way. Like, there is a degree of emotional fortitude that should be necessary for playing diplomacy. However, not all players have that. So when I'm saying this is what I think Russia wants to hear, not what I actually believe. But ultimately, I think you're making a mistake by allowing France to win. This game is going to be publicized. So this is actually where I do bring in a very slight amount of shame, but not in the sense of criticism like Italy was doing, but in the sense of public peer pressure sort of shame, because that sort of shame can actually convince someone like this, who, if someone's getting this emotional about the game, they're also probably someone who gets emotional about what other people think about them. And so hearing loud and clear that their actions are going to be visible to other people, and those other people might look badly on them, might also be a factor in helping to convince Russia here. So this is why I bring this up. So this game is going to be publicized and hopefully advertised on the diplomacy briefing, and I wanted to add that in there because even if they don't know what that is, it makes it sound more official. Your name is connected to this game. Maybe that doesn't matter too much, but nevertheless, there will be people who will see your moves and hear your thoughts. And anybody who watches, when they see you throw to France, they will disregard anything about your previous strategy and see you as Italy does, a sore loser. Though I may have disagreed with some of your strategic decisions, you've played this game well. I don't necessarily agree with that, but again, I need to stoke their ego a little bit. And if you end up in a 4-way draw, it'll reflect well on your strategy. Rather than getting eliminated, you're able to make your units a necessary part of the stalemate line. Highly strategic. Once again, I have to find places to make relatively truthful compliments. In this case, I think this is more about France France could have allowed Italy and I to eliminate Russia, but instead they're forcing us to work with Russia. I think that's a mistake on France's part at this point because, except for Russia throwing the solo, they shouldn't be able to win here, and so therefore eliminating an extra player should get them more points or, a better score, I guess. But nevertheless, Russia is necessary for this draw, and so there is a level of strategy to that, and so I'm trying to provide as many legitimate compliments as I can to make my message feel as sincere as possible, because really what I'm trying to get off here is a sincerity in wanting to continue working with Russia and getting to this draw, communicating an emotional message to them, because that's what they'll hear, not a logical message at this point. So anyways, if you're trying to spite Italy and I, you have already done a great job of doing so by steadfastly remaining alive despite our best efforts to eliminate you. In a 4-way draw, we all get equal recognition. So this is another thing that, a lot of when Russia's coming from an emotional standpoint of, I want to get revenge on Italy, and so the best revenge I can get is having France solo. And I think that this is another one of those cases where you could redirect that revenge to saying, ha, Italy, look, I survived, right? And that in itself is sufficient revenge to matter for that emotion, but it also allows me to stay in the draw, and that's all I care about. So it's like I'm trying to now deflect Russia's feelings away from making this action that is really harmful to my game. So anyways, so I continue. Don't let France manipulate you into making an impulsive decision that is understandable but ultimately will look very silly on the YouTube video to an outside observer. France hasn't cared about you or helped you at all this game, and all they're doing now is attacking you. You have no obligation to reward them with a win. So the final point that I make here is that oftentimes when players throw a solo to another, it's because they're like, oh, this player was nice to me the whole game, and so now I'll give them my centers so that they win rather than this opponent that's been really annoying this whole game, because I'm going to lose either way, right? That's normally the sort of decision-making process to throwing a solo. I've done it before. I think pretty much every diplomacy player has at some point or another. It's relatively understandable. I think this is a bit of a different case, but nevertheless, I think there's a degree to which Russia's saying, oh, Italy and Turkey have both attacked me this whole game. France hasn't done anything except now, so I'll give them the win because I like them better. But so I'm trying to convince them that that's not the case, that France is actually this big bad that we need to stop. Because really, France hasn't done anything for Russia. France has just attacked Germany, right? Which, what would France have done otherwise? I think this is fair, this would hopefully be convincing if anything were to be convincing. I then follow up a few minutes later with another message, and here I provide the actual strategic considerations. So after the emotional stuff, I provide a sandbox, and what I include in that sandbox is actually forfeiting Sevastopol. I say, I am happy to give you back Sevastopol if that makes any difference. Currently my orders are to support Sevastopol hold, but I can change them if you agree. And the thing is that it is possible to make a guaranteed capture of Warsaw with Ukraine, and in addition have Russia move Moscow to Sevastopol and St. Petersburg to Moscow, which gives up St. Petersburg, but St. Petersburg isn't defensible in the long run anyways, so that was kind of the logic there. And this is another one of those things now, kind of not just making an emotional argument, but now kind of putting my money where my mouth is, that I'm willing to give them something, which is totally silly here because we're just looking for a draw. We're just trying to make a stalemate line. So it shouldn't matter if Russia's on 2 centers or 3 at the end of this game. But Russia is an emotional player, and I think that could matter a lot to Russia, and especially because Sevastopol is one of their home centers, and a lot of these sorts of players also have an unrealistic level of attachment to their home centers. So giving that back to them is I think something that could also be convincing, especially since I asked for Sevastopol. They gave it to me willingly, with the promise that eventually I'd give it back. And I kind of didn't do that the way that I told them I would, but now I'm kind of following through on that. So I think for all of those reasons, it's important to offer Sevastopol, despite the fact that logically it doesn't matter at all. But emotionally to Russia, it might matter a great deal. So I sent all of this pretty close to when the moves were first adjudicated, and got no response back, which I wasn't really surprised by. You can kind of put in this effort, and sometimes someone has resigned to just lose the game and doesn't care anymore, isn't really going to check the press, anything like that. So I wasn't really expecting too much, and it seemed like I hadn't gotten much back. But I wanted to give Russia a second chance because, firstly, why not just try? And secondly, I think providing a follow-up in these sorts of cases, especially to an emotional player like this, is a good indicator that, to a degree, I actually care about them, right? I think you can see this in real life as well, where you'll have better friends and things if you follow up with them because you're showing effort to make this sort of emotional connection. So in the same way, yesterday, I messaged in the same group chat, you are a better person than this, Russia. You've played a good game and deserve to draw with the rest of us. So just that. And, as just kind of a short message, just to hope that Russia might consider changing the orders now. And they've had a couple, I think like a whole day even, to think about this and maybe come back to it a little bit more fresh and reconsider their moves. And after that, Russia sent me a private message saying, please support Ukraine to Warsaw. You can mediate the conversation with Italy. I'm done talking to him. So at this point, I set my orders to actually give Russia Sevastopol, even though I don't need to. I just want to make absolutely certain that if Russia actually does indeed move Ukraine to Warsaw, they'll still have to set themselves to be a 4-way draw. So I don't want them to then get annoyed at the last second and then just throw the game at that point, because theoretically they could still do such a thing. So anyway, so I am actually letting Russia into Sevastopol. I changed my orders, and I think at this point I have relatively high confidence that Russia will actually go through with this, because why would a player who has already stated out loud that they were throwing the game come back and do this weird manipulation if they're still throwing the game? There's no point once they're throwing game, why would they put in any extra effort? So given that Russia is messaging here, I have relatively high confidence that we will actually be able to get into the draw, which I'm really happy about. I wasn't expecting that. I'd kind of resigned myself to a loss at this point, but it looks like potentially some of my messaging did actually have the intended effect. And I think it's especially clear because Russia states explicitly, I'm done talking to Italy. And so I think that really what Italy said was very harmful to our potential with working with Russia, because they just kind of burned the bridge there. And I think this just goes into a general strategy thing for diplomacy, that even when you're really annoyed with a player, usually it's better to act as nicely as possible as you can to them and state any annoyances in very plain and simple language. I don't like that you did this because that's harmful to me in this way, rather than, come on, why did you do that? That's ridiculous, you're stupid, whatever. Because all of those things are just harmful in the end to your cause. And especially this game, I definitely made sure to do that with France, because there were a number of times France sent me messages that I felt were quite patronizing and sometimes quite just strategically ridiculous that they're asking me to do. Building fleets where I was on 2 centers or something. I mean, I'm not remembering the specifics super well. I'm not going to go back through the messages right now. But either way, I never came back to France and said, you shut up or whatever, like, why are you being so annoying? I tried to respond as politely as possible, because in the end, France really wanted to eliminate Italy, but was happy talking with me the whole time. And so I think that's one of these things that even with players that you're across the map from them, you don't necessarily have a say, or with players who you are openly rivals with, trying not to burn down those bridges and maintain respectful conversation, and sometimes even compliment someone on successfully stabbing you, is one thing that I like to do a lot. Because it's saying, hey, obviously I'm pissed at this, I'm stating this up front, but at the same time I can recognize that you made a good strategic decision and successfully manipulated me into not countering your stab. And I think that can be a way to both reopen the conversation with that person and maybe get them to stop attacking you, as well as make sure that you aren't closing any doors in the future where maybe that player can't eliminate you and later you'll have to work with them. And if you've said a bunch of rude things to that player, they're very unlikely to want to work with you, and they might just try to eliminate you where it doesn't strategically make sense. So anyways, I think that's just kind of a dialogue on some of the emotional manipulations in diplomacy that I haven't seen particularly good resources out there for the emotional side of diplomacy. I've mentioned Brother Board before. He does an excellent job writing about the strategic implications and has also made some really excellent posts about the negotiation side and sort of the art of negotiation, in the sense of convincing people to do the things that you want. And he has certainly touched upon the emotional side, but I think that as a primarily gunboat player, he doesn't have as much of a knowledge of that emotional sort of manipulation. And honestly, I think not a lot of people are willing to think so upfront about those sorts of emotional manipulations, because ultimately that would in real life be considered sociopathic behavior. And one of the reasons why I love diplomacy is that it is not real life, and so you can lie and cheat and emotionally manipulate all you want. But yeah, I think many players aren't willing to think of the game in this sense, and I think that's really detrimental to them, because there are lots of situations where you can get people to stop attacking you when they would be otherwise, or get people to work with you where why would they? But you can really convince them based on their emotions that they should do this, and ultimately emotions are more powerful than logic a lot of the time. So I think it's a wonderful strategic aspect of the game. And it's something that is, from what I've seen, very difficult for a lot of players. So this is, I know I've recorded for way longer than I was intending to. Kind of went on a tangent about this. I seriously doubt that most of this will be actually included in the video in the end, but I still think it was important to have explained sort of the logic behind what I was talking about, because there are a lot of nuances. And I think this is one of my strengths as a diplomacy player. I'm fairly bad at tactics. I do pretty bad in the vast majority of gunboat games that I've played. I think even in this game, you can see I made a number of strategic blunders, which I'll go into in the after game commentary. I'll I'll explain all the mistakes that I think I made. So I think strategy is certainly something that I need to improve as a player. One of the reasons why I think that I'm also not particularly good at getting solos as a player in my current progress and knowledge, because I'm not good at the strategic moves in the last couple turns to actually get that 18th center, where other people are better at that. But I am quite good at sticking around for a long time as when people attack me, because I can do that sort of emotional manipulation and maybe don't feel bad about it like some other players might. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on this. I hope if no one else hears this, it's at least helpful to you, Florida Man. Yeah, I've been watching a couple of your videos, and they're super cool, and it's interesting to hear your strategic perspective. So here are a couple of my strategic perspectives. Anyways, yeah, adjudication's happening in about half an hour. Really on edge about seeing what'll happen. This is one of those moments that's really nerve-wracking in diplomacy. Will the person that you think is going to do what you want them to do, will they actually follow through with it? So yeah, I guess we'll wait and see. Whatever happens, I'll be interested in talking about it after the game. I think this will really be the last recording before the game ends. I have pity on all the editing that you're going to have to do for this whole production.
The GM's perspective. So ultimately, this game ended with, despite Turkey's and Italy's best efforts, Russia gifting France with the solo victory. Instead of taking support from Ukraine back into Warsaw, Russia chose to move his Ukrainian unit and attack Sevastopol, which allowed France to retain Warsaw and ultimately win the game. The final position looked like this, and you're going to get the final wrap-up videos pretty soon, the post-mortems, so please stay tuned for that. I hope you've enjoyed this series of diplomacy videos. Talleyrand was a highly time-intensive and very big investment for us, for all of those who participated, so we really hope that you who are watching have enjoyed it. Until next time, Florida Man out.